My name is Antonio Petro. I am the Director of Regeneration Canada. Regeneration Canada is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting soil health and regenerative agriculture to mitigate climate change, enhance biodiversity, and improve farmers' livelihood. Today we are at the McDonald campus of McGill University. I'm here with Cynthia Kalamek. She is the principal investigator of the DART project.
We set up this project to try to understand how differences in the level of crop diversity were able to maintain the function and activity of organisms that are living in the soil, but also above ground resiliency. So if we see a change in precipitation levels, can we maintain crop yields, for example, or can we maintain the ecosystem services provided by the microbial community? We have one of our plots that is dry bean and the annual wheat, so the intercropping of those two species. And you can already see, compared to the monoculture wheat, that we have more ground cover with just these two species. Our specific objective is to investigate the interactive effects of crop diversity and variable precipitation. We have 4 sub-objectives within that. The first is to see how the microorganisms living in the soil respond to the interactive effects of crop diversity. And then we're also looking at whether or not we can reduce pesticide application. We have a third component where we're tracking greenhouse gas emissions under these different treatments. And then lastly is to look at how crop diversity is affecting soil carbon and how that might be mediated by changes in precipitation.
What exactly are you testing here?
We have 8 crop trials that include 3 main crops. So we have annual wheat and we have dry bean. And then we also have a fairly novel, at least to Quebec, crop. And then within that we have various combinations where we're changing the level of diversity. On top of that, we have 3 precipitation treatments where we've got a 30% reduction in precipitation, a 30% increase in precipitation, and then a control that's just ambient rainfall. And so when we combine all of that, we have 24 trials that we've replicated 4 times for 96 plots. Here we're in the plot that has the 4 species, so it would be our highest diversity plot. We've got the 2 cover crops, ryegrass and white clover, and then the bean and wheat. And you can see there's a lot of vegetation and a lot of biomass. With this plot, we can't apply herbicides because there's no herbicide that won't kill one of these 4 species. Our hope is that the cover crops will outcompete the weeds. And you can also see a lot of biomass left over from last year.
What I was going to say,
and this does help with moisture retention. But in our elevated rainfall, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Right.
And so that's why it becomes important to test these practices under these different climate scenarios, because it could end up leading to unwanted consequences if the moisture then becomes too high.
So you're growing a really interesting crop here, which is Kernza, and that it has been really having a buzz around it in the past few years.
Well, Kernza is an intermediate perennial wheat. It's a variety that was produced by the Land Institute in Kansas in the US. It's got this deep-rooted system, and those roots help feed the biological community below ground, and they also pump a lot of carbon from the atmosphere down below the soil. And it provides this living cover because it is a perennial, and so it only needs to be replanted every 3 to 5 years. It also can be harvested for forage, so it has kind of a dual economic purpose for grain and forage.
Right, and in terms of soil health, of course, as you said, it also increased the water holding capacity of the soil and maybe more carbon because more root and filtration, but also you're trying to really diversify the rotation system itself. And that's also something that is really missing in the research. And one other group that I really find very interesting is the dry bean and small grain that you're trying.
We know they grow well here in Quebec in our colder climate, and we'd like to see not just an increase in diversity at the farm level, but an increase in diversity across the landscape. The question is, what data do we need from growing dry bean and wheat to increase the adoption and uptake of these alternative crops to corn and soybean?
This is really great. We got the legumes, we got the grass, we got the deep root, we got the nitrogen, we got the humidity. Let's see if we need it, want it or not. But I think this is a good example of above ground biodiversity. This is basically what we at Regeneration Canada is working on, which is the regenerative practices like what you mentioned. And we're really in a need for more and more data that relates the impact of these practices on the overall ecosystem resilience and farm resilience.
Exactly, and that's why we were really excited to partner with Regeneration Canada, was to help us connect what we're doing here with regional farmers. You know, we're already experiencing these increases in flooding and drought. And at the same time, we're getting mounting pressure to manage agricultural systems in a more sustainable way. And so our hope is that with the work we're doing here, that we'll be able to meet some of those challenges. First, that we'll be able to provide producers with information on alternatives to corn and soybean and ways to diversify the Quebec landscape. And secondly, to understand how some of these soil health strategies might increase agroecosystem resilience under these changing precipitation patterns.